So, well, our homework is due, so I think we'll collect it. But please don't do the homework. Let's listen to what we are. Okay, now as I told you, firstly, some of the operational things. We will have a class tomorrow. Tomorrow from 5 onwards, 5 to 6:15 or 6:30, whatever. Because definitely on 10th of February, I will not be teaching. Maybe there may be other days also, so we will keep that Tuesday. So that will also give you, as I said, some respite from the morning classes. I know for some of you who have classes all day, it becomes a bit difficult. I don't know how many of you have classes from 8 to 5 on Tuesdays. If you have, then it's a bit of a... Well, I will also probably be uploading some of these lectures, but a bit later. Because if I start uploading immediately, then nobody will come to the classes. So the video recording of these lectures, I upload the lectures anyway immediately, but the video recordings will also be uploaded soon. Okay. Now, what we are trying to focus in the last class was that we have seen that when we apply a uniaxial load, that means load along a particular axis, we get, if it is a tensile load, there is an extension, and we related that extension to the properties of the material. But the extension in the x direction, let's say the load is applied in the x direction, is also accompanied by a compression in the other two directions. And that is what we are saying. And this compression, normally it is a compression. Nowadays, there are some very special materials where they will also expand in the other two directions. Now, the assumption we have made here, as I wrote in the last class, was that the material which we are talking is isotropic. That means, if we look at the directional behavior, then as far as the material is concerned, the properties do not change with the direction. There's another term which is often used is homogeneous. Homogeneous means properties do not change with location. But that is not so important for our discussion. But here, if the properties do not change with the direction, then it is clear that when we have a uniaxial load in the x direction, then the compression in the y and the z directions should be the same, because properties do not change with direction. Okay? So now, that is what we discussed. And the other two strains which we get, we call them as lateral strains. And then what we find is the lateral strains and the axial strains for a given material, the ratio is constant. And this ratio we define by what we call as Poisson's ratio. And we define this term Poisson's ratio, for which we use the symbol nu, which is equal to negative of lateral strain divided by axial strain. And I have written this. So this is where we were in the last class. Now also, one thing is that what we expect when we are pulling a material, obviously mass is conserved. Whether the load is applied or not applied, mass does not change. But because we have this quantity called Poisson's ratio, which makes the material shrink at different rates, so therefore, in general, the volume of the solid will not be conserved. Mass will be conserved, but there will be different extensions and different contractions for different materials at different rates. So in general, the volume will not be conserved. But because these strains are so small, since the property, and In fact, I thought I will present the properties, but I didn't get them. But typically, all these elasticities are in the order of gigapascals, 10 to the power of 9 pascals. So the extensions are very, very small. And we'll work out today the change in volume which we will find will not be very large. So we can't observe the change in volume. But in general, there is a change in volume except for some particular values of nu. For a specific value of nu, it is possible that there will be no change of volume, but in general, there is a change of volume, which something is a bit not so physical. And it is not so physical because the change in volume is very small. So we don't observe it. Okay. So now, given this, this was from the last class. And let's now move to today's class. These relations which I have written, they automatically follow the definition of Poisson's ratio and Young's modulus. Young's modulus is the ratio of stress to strain in the same direction, and Poisson's ratio is related like this. So therefore, the strains in the lateral strains will be related to the axial strain by minus nu times sigma x upon E. So that means what we have seen so far is that there are two properties which we have seen of a material. One is the Young's modulus, and the second is Poisson's ratio. So they will not vary for materials, and typically, as we said, that Poisson's ratio is always the way we have defined this generally is positive. Now let us look at what we call as so far we have seen whether loading is only in one direction. Now we will extend this to a case of multi-axial loading, which means the loading could be so. So if I have a rectangular block of material like this, let this be x, let this be y, let this be z axis. I can place the coordinates anywhere, maybe at the center here. I've just put it at one edge just to show the directions. Okay. Now, what I mean by multi-axial loading is that on the x face, I have a load in the x direction which causes sigma x. On the y face, so maybe I can use different colors for the loads. What's happened? I don't know. Yeah. So that means there are three different loads. They need not be equal. Sigma x, sigma y, sigma z on the three faces. Is this the most general loading, or can we have something more? Yeah? Yeah, bolo. Yeah, it's okay. Is this the most general loading this material can have, or can we have something else also? Think of your assignment which you are submitting today. What type of loading is there? There could be shear stresses also. So here we are looking at the case where the loading is such that there are only multi-axial loading. So there are no shear stresses on these faces. Of course, if we rotate at an angle, the shear stresses will come. So we have sigma x, sigma y, sigma z. This is the loading on this element. Now, that means on all these faces, the shear stresses are zero. Okay, so it is not the most general loading. Now, what can we say about these axes? Are these the principal axes or not? The x, y, z. They are. Why? Because tau xy, tau y, tau xz, tau yz are zero. So these also happen to be the principal axis. Now, what we have seen in Mohr circle, we have seen it only for a plane. Okay? Suppose if I look at an element in the xy plane and I keep z as the same, and there if I do a rotation, will the Mohr circle relation hold or not? That means I keep the z axis as the principal axis only. And if I rotate in the xy plane, the Mohr circle relations will still hold. Similarly, if I look at the xz plane and look at rotate things about the y-axis, it will hold. So let's try to plot if we have to plot a Mohr circle for this. Let's assume it need not be like this. They can be in any order. But all these three are, here what we realize is for this loading, sigma x, sigma y, sigma z are principal stresses. Now, see, the relation for Mohr circle holds only for a planar relation, the circle. But when we have principal stresses, so if it was a general loading, I could not have plotted a Mohr circle based on that loading. But if I orient myself on the principal axis, then let's see what happens. So this is my sigma axis, this is tau axis. Sigma x is the greatest. So the first point which I will get will be sigma x comma 0. Okay? Then I will get sigma y. And here I have assumed all of them are positive. It is possible that one or two of them may be negative also, or all three of them can be negative also. I've just assumed everything to be positive. So now, based on sigma x and sigma y, because these are the principal stresses, can I draw a Mohr circle? I can. So this circle here between x and y will look like this. This is the Mohr circle for the xy plane. Is that clear? Pardon? Tau. What is tau in this plane? 0. Because these are principal axes, so taus are 0. That's why we can plot it in 3 dimensions only for the principal axis, not for any other axis, for the general case. For a planar case, we can always plot a Mohr circle, as you have seen. But for a 3D case, it can only be done for principal axis. Similarly, what will be the Mohr circle for the YZ plane? A circle between Y and Z. And what will be the circle for the XZ plane? A total circle Is this clear? We are able to do this only because X, Y, and Z are principal axes. And so this is the generalized Mohr circle for this 3D case. And what happens is, what I'm not going to prove this, but you can show that if I rotate along any arbitrary axis, the state of stress has to lie in the shaded region. Which means if I move along the XY plane, I can only move along that circle. If I move along the YZ plane, I can move only along the left circle. If I move in the XZ plane, I can move along the outer circle. But if I move in a general 3-dimensional general direction, then it can be shown that I will only be moving in the shaded portion. I will not be able to go inside the shaded. This I'm not proving. We'll leave it for the next course. If you do any advanced course in solid mechanics, then it's a very straightforward. So this is how the Mohr circle looks like for a 3-dimensional loading for principal axis. So let me write this also. Okay. Is that fine? So, in fact, one of the reasons why I did Mohr circle, which is chapter 7, earlier was to show you that any state of stress also leads to shear stresses at a different angle. So that is why we did this at the start itself, just so that now when I plot any loading, you should be able to get the Mohr circle. Now, what will be the maximum shear stress for this type of loading? In general, I've plotted this. This is the general loading. Now, obviously, there are no shear stresses. I have only sigma x, sigma y, sigma z on the faces. But a lot of materials, as we have seen, they fail on the basis of the maximum value of shear stress. That a shear stress in any plane, if it exceeds that value, the material will fail. So now for this case, what will be the maximum shear stress? It will be the radius of the bigger circle. And that is equal to sigma x minus sigma z divided by 2. Okay? So that is what the maximum shear stress will be. And a food for thought. What you have done in your homework was a case of plane strain or plane stress, where we had sigma x and sigma y only. If I ask you what is the maximum shear stress there, you will have to think about it, and I'll ask this in your exam. Not now. Okay. So now, let's now continue with this multi-axial loading. We have seen how this looks like. Now, we look at an isotropic material with multi-axial loading. Now, let the original cube has let this original thing which was subject to the loading be a cube with length of side, each side being 1 unit. So now the deformed cube or the deformed cube, which is now parallelepiped, has sides now. If I want to put what will be the length of the deformed parallelepiped, what will be the sides? Let the strains be epsilon x, epsilon y, and epsilon z. So what will be the final length of the sides of the new parallelepiped? The original length was 1. The strain in the x direction is how much? Epsilon x. So what will be the new length? 1 plus epsilon x. Because it will be epsilon x multiplied by 1 will be the deformation. So the lengths of the new sides will have length 1 plus epsilon x, 1 plus epsilon y, and 1 plus epsilon z. And the epsilon x, epsilon y, epsilon z, they can be positive or negative, depending on the type of load. So epsilon x can be in fact, as we have seen, if it is a uniaxial loading, if epsilon x is positive, then epsilon y and epsilon z will be negative. So this will be the total this thing. Now, also another thing which we realized here is that translation when you apply a load, the body can move. And when we say this, then the movement of the body is not being included. What we are including is only the deformation which is taking place due to a force. So that means we are assuming that in some sense we are fixing one of the ends and then we are pulling so that the body does not move. If it moves, then that movement or the translation has to be subtracted. Because this is only the deformation because of the material property. Am I clear? Okay. So now, given this, then what we do is we apply the principle of superposition. That means we add all effects. And this we do because we are allowed to do because that deformations are small. So because they are small, then we can apply the principle of superposition. And also, we have to assume we are in the linear range. Once there is non-linearity, then we cannot apply superposition. Superposition only works for linear relations. So we are in the linear range, that means elastic range. There's another subtle argument which I will talk about once I talk about the shear strains. What we assume is the axial load is causing only an axial strain. It is not causing a shear strain. I have not even defined a shear strain. And the fact that if a shear strain, what will a shear strain do? Shear strain will change the shape. See here, parallelepiped stays a parallelepiped. A shear strain will tend to change the angle. And if you visualize, if I invert, if I rotate by 180 degrees, then the shear strains will change directions. But axial strains will not. So therefore, an axial load only causes an axial strain. It does not cause a shear strain. So that has also been assumed here. So we add up all these effects and we are able to do this because stress versus strain relations are linear. That is, we are not in the plastic zone, we are only in the elastic zone or elasticity. And secondly, deformations are small and do not affect application of other loads. So therefore, because of sigma x, we will have sigma x by E in the x direction and minus nu sigma x upon E in the y and z directions. I'm just looking at the effect of sigma x. Sigma x causes a strain, sigma x by E in the x direction and minus nu times sigma x by E in the y and z directions. Similarly, what will sigma y do? So these are the strains which are coming because of sigma x. Because of sigma y, what will happen? What will I get? Sigma y by E in the y direction and minus nu sigma y by E in the x and z direction. So that's sort of complementary to this. So this will cause sigma y by E in the y direction and minus nu sigma y by E in the x and z directions. And sigma z causes a strain of so therefore, what will be the total strain in the x direction? Sigma x by E minus nu sigma y by E minus nu sigma z by E. So the total strain in the x direction will be equal to sigma x by E minus nu sigma y by E minus nu sigma z by E. And similarly, epsilon y will be equal to sigma y by E minus nu and these relations are called as generalized Hooke's law. Okay? So, as you can see, we are advancing from the high school physics. High school physics told us that we have strains, stress upon strain is equal to E. Now, we have introduced another parameter nu, and then we get a relation between stress and strain in terms of E and nu. Okay? So, slightly more sort of, you can call it advanced or whatever version of what you have done. Now, based on this, we define a couple of properties called dilatation and bulk modulus. The total volume after the loading, what will the volume be of this parallelepiped? So it will be equal to 1 plus epsilon x into 1 plus epsilon y into 1 plus epsilon z. Now, for most materials, the practical materials which we count, the modulus of elasticity is very big. As I said, except for if you look at something like thin plastic, which can extend very easily. We look at a typical material like a metal or wood or any other solid. So then the elasticity, modulus of elasticity is very high, therefore the strains are low. So because of which what we can do is, we can write this V prime is equal to if we neglect these higher order products, epsilon x, epsilon y, epsilon x square, in fact, epsilon x square will not come. It will probably be epsilon x, epsilon y, epsilon z, etc. Epsilon x, epsilon z, and the cubic terms. So this is what V prime will be. So the change in volume, which we write as E, this will be equal to V prime minus 1, and this will be equal to epsilon x plus epsilon y plus epsilon z. Change in volume is equal to V prime minus 1, and we define E is equal to change in volume divided by the volume. and this is what we call as dilatation. And dilatation therefore will be equal to and if we express this in terms of the material property, then this will be equal to sigma x plus sigma y plus sigma z upon E minus 2 nu sigma x plus sigma y plus sigma z upon E. And this I can write it as equal to 1 minus 2 nu upon E times sigma x plus sigma y. Okay? Just see if this makes sense. And okay? If now this part will also come important when we do fluid mechanics. If the loading is uniform hydrostatic pressure, what do we mean by uniform pressure? Pressure, first of all, is defined as the stress, but it acts inwards. So pressure will be minus of sigma. We have always defined sigma as something which pulls, but pressure is something which contracts. And when we talk of uniform pressure, what does that mean? That sigma x, sigma y, and sigma z are all equal. That is what is the meaning of uniform. They could be different, but when they are equal and when they are not negative, all of them are negative, that is what we call as pressure. Okay, so that means this loading which we are talking of is sigma x is equal to sigma y is equal to sigma z, and this we call as minus p, and this is the, you can think of as the definition of pressure. Sorry, so therefore pressure will be equal to minus of because anyway this is equal, this will be, and this, the reason why I've written this is in fluid mechanics, even when sigma x, sigma y, and sigma z may not be equal, we will still define pressure as the average of all the three stresses, of all the three axial stresses with a minus sign. And average means, so this is how we define pressure. Now, how will the Mohr circle for this look like? Just try to plot. This is this thing. How will the Mohr circle look like? थोड़ा सा सोचो. This is a three-dimensional state of loading. This is one of the questions I normally ask in the exam. अब मैं आज क्लास में ही करवा रहा हूँ. How do we draw? Sigma x, sigma y, sigma z, all of them are equal. So it will just be a single point. And where will it lie? Which side of the axis? Positive or negative? Negative, because pressure. So that means if I plot a Mohr circle, this is the Mohr circle for uniform pressure. And this also tells you must have done a Pascal's law or whatever, which says that pressure is equal in all directions. So here, since this Mohr circle is a point, whatever rotation you do, whichever angle you do, the force will always be the same. And if some of you may have seen the notes where I have put something extra, what I have said is that if we look at it in terms of linear algebra, then the principal stresses are actually the eigenvectors. And if the eigenvalues are the same, then any vector is an eigenvector. And so this also shows that at any angle, whichever angle you go, whatever rotation you do, the stresses will be equal, which will be equal to minus P, and they will be only sort of an axial stress or a compressive stress. No shear stress will be possible for this type of loading. Is that fine? Are you understanding me, or am I just going tangentially over the... Okay. So now, for this case, if we look at E which we defined as 1 minus 2 nu upon E times this becomes equal to minus 3P into 1 minus 2 nu upon E. And we define a quantity called bulk modulus, for which we use a symbol K, and this is defined as E divided by 3 times 1 minus 2 nu, and this bulk modulus is also called the modulus of compressibility, and E is equal to minus of P upon K. Now, there's a reason why I'm talking about this at this stage. Normally, we talk of pressure mainly in fluid mechanics. But the reason why we are talking of this thing here is that any material subject to a loading of P can only if I have a material to which I am subjecting a loading of P, then its volume can only reduce. It can never increase. Why? Because you are compressing it from all sides. If you compress it from all sides, the material can never increase in volume. If that is so, then K has to be greater than 0. And this implies that 1 minus 2 nu is greater than 0. And this gives us the limit that nu will go from 0 to half for most materials. We are excluding again the materials where nu is negative. So this gives that the maximum value of nu, at least the maximum value one can get from this, will be equal to half. And this is for materials where So this is how we establish this upper limit on nu. Is that fine? So next, let us talk about shearing strain. अटेंडेंस लिस्ट पहुंच गई है सबके पास? सबने साइन कर दिए होंगे? जो बाद में आए हैं कुछ, उनको बाद में कर देना तुम लोग, ठीक है? काउंट भी ठीक है? एक्स्ट्रा नाम तो नहीं काटने दो चार? नहीं, ठीक है, ओके ना, ओके। थोड़ा सा ब्रेक ले लेते हैं. Some of you have been writing to me that you are missing something. कोई किसी को कोई फॉर्मूला रेसिंग में जाना था या चले गए कुछ बच्चे, तो वो डीन से लेटर लिखवा के लाए हैं कि इस डेट से इस डेट तक नहीं रहेंगे, सो अटेंडेंस में नॉट बी considered and all. So what I'm going to do is, we'll have total of 28 lectures. So 25 will be counted. तो अगर किसी कारण से आप, if someone like, one of the very common excuse, maybe it is not an excuse, is death in the family. मतलब जब तक कोर्स खत्म होता है, दादा दादी नाना नानी अंकल आंटी सब खत्म हो जाते हैं. मतलब एक करके, मतलब ये प्लीज उन लोगों को कोर्स के लिए मत खत्म करो. आई वुड नॉट लाइक दैट. सो what one, and I'm not trying to, maybe there may be a genuine case. I'm not trying to hurt your feelings. Sorry if I have done that. If there's any genuine case like that, but so up to 3 attendances, I will anyway mark out, which should take care of this. But still, if there is an extra reason, you have been ill or something, you can always contact me. As I said, the main reason for attendance marks is to ensure that people come in the class. And also, I will be extra helpful if you are failing the course. I may increase for you people, only for the people who are failing, this 5 to 10 to help you pass, but not for others. And इसलिए मेरे ख्याल से attendance सबके लिए बराबर हो जाएगी. So actually it is just a game. क्योंकि जब सबको सारे नंबर मिल जाएंगे तो relative grading में कोई फर्क नहीं पड़ता. But this is to ensure that you people come. Okay. So now let's come back. We talk about shearing strain. So now let's look at a case of so now we are inverting. Earlier we had seen only axial stress. Now we are looking at a case where there is only shear stress on the faces. And in a planar case, it will look like this: tau yx and tau xy, which are equal. And in a three-dimensional case, you will have 2 shear stresses on each face. So this is a planar case, and I can just show. My drawing is not so good, so x, which is, this is x, this is y, this is z. I'm just showing representative. In a 3D loading, if there are only shear stresses, then it will be tau yx and tau zx. Okay? I'm not showing the other elements because that will cause more confusion. You can have a look at the figure in the book. So this is for a 3D case. Now, let's look at a planar case. What does tau yx tend to do? It tends to deform the shape of a cuboidal element to an oblique parallelepiped, and in a planar case from square to a rhombus. If it's a planar case, then it will tend, if we start from a square element, because of this stress, the angle will change. So if this was the original picture, this will change to something like this. This is tau yx, tau xy. So this changes to like this. And if this angle initially was 90 degrees, then so basically the measure of the shear strain which we do is in terms of the angle of deformation. The measure of the axial strain was in terms of the change in length. But when a shear stress is applied, the deformation is measured in terms of the angle by which the element deforms. So this gamma xy is what we call as a shear strain. So we had a unit cube changes into a unit there are two angles and the other angle is so this deformation we measure in terms of angles, and gamma xy is what we call as the shearing strain. Now, if this is x and this is y, then this gamma xy is what we call as positive. So this is pi by 2 Now, once again, as we have in the previous case, we are only counting the deformation. The element may also rotate. The rotation is not counted here. What is counted is only the deformation which is taking place. As a rigid body, the whole element may also rotate because of the force, so that rotation is not included. And this gamma xy is considered positive when in the positive xy axis there is a reduction of the angle. That is how we treat it as gamma xy. So here, let me write this also. Only deformation is considered. So now, as we had a relation between sigma and epsilon, we ask ourselves, is there a relation between tau xy and gamma xy? Just as we had Hooke's law for the elongation, so we ask a question, is there a relation between gamma xy and tau xy? And for that, again, we have to plot a tau xy versus gamma xy diagram. And what we find is it has the same shape, but the strength is about half of the tensile stress. And so we define G, called the shear modulus or modulus of, is somebody aware of, has used these pens? I always have this problem that after some time there is a lag between my writing and the pen, which you must be observing also. If somebody has a solution to that, please come and tell. After the class, you can come and tell me what I should do. I'm doing something wrong. Either I'm pressing something wrong on the pen or whatever, but there is a bit of a lag which is coming, which is creates a lot of this thing. So we plot, so what we define is, we define tau xy is equal to G times gamma xy. So this is exactly like the Hooke's law which we had, but this is, you can call this as Hooke's law for shear stresses and shear strain. So this is you must be observing this gap. That's what Hooke's law for shear stress. Okay. Now, once again, if we look at this, gamma xy is dimensionless. G What will be the units of G? The same as that for stress, which means pascals or newtons per meter square. And what we find is generally G is less than E by 2 and G is greater than E by 3. So 1/3 of E is less than G is less than half of E. Okay. So now, and another thing one can show is that if a shear stress is applied, then it does not cause any elongation. That means shear stress will only deform with the angle, it will not cause a change in length. Change in length will only come because of the normal stress, not because of shear stress. And once again, the argument for that goes by rotation of the element by 180 degrees. The shear stress, the sign will change, but if an elongation is to occur, its sign will not change. So therefore, a pure shear stress will not cause any elongation. Just as a pure normal stress did not cause any deformation or any shear. So these two in that sense are independent. And so finally we can generalize and we will get Hooke's law for in the I'll just try something. In elastic limit for isotropic material, we have epsilon x is equal to sigma x upon E minus nu sigma y upon E minus nu sigma z upon E, etc. And gamma xy is equal to tau xy upon g, gamma yz is equal to So now, how many material constants have we got when we talk of Hooke's law? For a given material, if we have to define the relation between stress and strain, how many constants do we need? 3. Which are the 3? Modulus of elasticity E, shear modulus G, and Poisson's ratio nu. So that means we have 3 properties of material. E, G, and nu. न्यू आया कि नहीं आ गया? But it turns out that these three actually are related. And we can show, and which I will be doing now, is that G is equal to E the three are not independent, they are related, and this we can expect because uh, once you are applying a shear, there's a change of angle, and this change of angle has to be related to the change of length in the other two directions. So the Poisson's ratio and the two moduli of elasticity are related. And to sort of understand this or to derive this, what one can do is, let's look at a case of uniaxial loading of load P. So this load P causes elongation or deformation based on the जो उड़ उड़ के आ रहा है, it's creating. See, if I look at the right face, what is this P doing? It is just causing an elongation. But suppose if I look at this diamond shaped element inside, what is P doing to this diamond shaped element? It will deform its shape. So the same load P, while it causes elongation on one face, but if I rotate the element, it causes a deformation. So that means what we have is if I look at a prismatic element which has this shape, and let this angle be pi by 4. This was if before the loading I take an element on that material which has sides 1 and 1 and an angle 45 degrees. Why do I choose 45 degrees? Because we know that the maximum deformation takes place at an angle of 45 degrees. How do we know that? Mohr circle. From Mohr circle, we know that maximum deformation comes at an angle of 90 degrees in Mohr circle, which is 45 degrees. Okay, so this is before deformation. After deformation, what will happen is this will become 1 plus epsilon x. This will become 1 minus nu times epsilon x. And this angle, let's say, is beta. And beta will be equal to pi by 4 minus gamma m by 2. So tangent of beta will be equal to tangent of pi by 4 minus tangent of, this is really becoming, ये 2 रह गया यहाँ, divided by 1 plus I'm sorry about this. But ugly class tak I will learn how to take care of this 2 has come somewhere else. So basically, I'll just tell you what we are going to do. We use this relation, and then we use the tangent beta will be equal to 1 minus nu epsilon x divided by 1 plus 1 plus epsilon x. And we equate the two. And when we equate the two and use the relations between E and nu, we will get, once we